Officer Michael Reynolds was driving across Memorial Bridge to his final therapy appointment, the same route he had taken every week since losing his K-9 partner. Suddenly, a German shepherd darted into traffic, lunging for what looked like deliberately placed food, before a black sedan struck the animal and sped away without stopping. 30 minutes later, as Mike paced the sterile hallway of Pine Valley Animal Hospital, the dog's life hanging by a thread inside the operating room, when Dr. Emily Wilson emerged with bloodied hands and a puzzled expression. She held up a small metal object removed from beneath the dog's skin. What he discovered would unravel a conspiracy that would shock the entire town of Pine Valley. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. Pine Valley sat nestled between rolling hills and the winding Jefferson River, a town of 25,000 that had seen better days. Once prosperous from the lumber mill that employed half the county, it now struggled with the opioid crisis that had swept through like a plague. The Memorial Bridge connected the struggling east side with the affluent neighborhoods to the west, a daily reminder of the town's growing divide. Michael "Mike" Reynolds had served the Pine Valley Police Department for 17 years. At 42, his weathered face and premature gray at his temples told the story of a man who had seen too much. Before joining the force, he'd served as a military K-9 handler in Afghanistan, bringing those skills home to establish the department's first K-9 unit. The creases around his blue eyes deepened only when he smiled, something that had become rare since the incident. 2 years ago, Mike and his German Shepherd partner, Rex, had responded to a drug bust gone wrong. When gunfire erupted, Rex had leapt to protect his handler, taking a bullet meant for Mike. The dog died in his arms on the way to the animal hospital. Since then, Mike had been going through the motions, his once promising career stalled by grief and mandatory therapy sessions that he attended but rarely engaged with. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been trying to break through Mike's walls for months. "You need to process this grief, or it will consume you," she'd warned during their last session. Chief Robert Thompson had made it clear that today's appointment would determine whether Mike could return to full duty or face desk assignment indefinitely. "I'm running out of excuses for you, Mike," the chief had said, his concern evident despite his gruff exterior. Mike lived alone in a small cabin by the river, surrounded by photos of Rex and commendations that gathered dust. His colleagues respected him, but maintained distance from the shadow of the man they once knew. Some whispered he was a ticking time bomb. Others believed he just needed the right reason to find himself again. What no one expected was that reason would come in the form of another German shepherd fighting for its life, a dog whose mysterious appearance would pull Mike back from the brink and thrust him into a conspiracy larger than anything Pine Valley had ever seen. The digital clock on Mike's dashboard read 3:47 p.m., 13 minutes until his appointment with Dr. Mitchell. The afternoon sun glinted off the steel beams of Memorial Bridge as he accelerated up the on-ramp, mentally rehearsing what he would say. After 2 years of mandatory sessions, today would determine whether he could return to the work that once defined him or be permanently assigned to desk duty, a fate that felt like a slow death to a man who'd spent his life in action. Traffic slowed to a crawl midway across the bridge. Mike drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, checking his watch. That's when he noticed the silver sedan, 3 cars ahead, pulling to the shoulder. The driver's door opened slightly, and a gloved hand emerged, dropping what looked like food onto the pavement before the car sped away. Before Mike could process the strange behavior, movement caught his eye. A German shepherd, lean and muscular with the distinctive black and tan markings, darted between cars toward the scattered food. Mike's heart leaped into his throat. The dog was a near-perfect match for Rex. Time seemed to slow as a black SUV changed lanes, the driver distracted by a phone. Mike slammed his hand on the horn, but it was too late. The sickening thud of impact echoed across the bridge as the dog's body was thrown 10 feet before crumpling on the asphalt. "No!" Mike shouted, pulling his cruiser across 2 lanes. He hit the emergency lights and leapt from the vehicle, forcing traffic to a halt, ignoring the blaring horns and shouts from frustrated drivers. He ran to the motionless animal. Blood pooled beneath the German shepherd's body, its breathing shallow and labored. "Hold on, buddy," Mike whispered, his hands shaking as they hovered over the injured animal. The dog's eyes, amber and clouded with pain, met his, triggering a flood of memories. Rex's eyes, looking up at him with the same trust as life faded from them. A small crowd gathered, some filming with their phones, others shouting about the traffic. "Can't you move it to the side?" a man in a business suit demanded. "Some of us have places to be." Mike ignored them, carefully removing his jacket to create a makeshift stretcher. "I need help," he called, and a young woman stepped forward. Together, they gently lifted the injured animal. "Pine Valley Animal Hospital is 5 minutes from here," the woman said, helping Mike carry the dog to his cruiser. With the German shepherd secured in his back seat, Mike radioed dispatch. "This is Officer Reynolds. I have an injured animal requiring emergency transport. Redirecting to Pine Valley Animal Hospital." "Confirmed." "Reynolds, do you need backup?" the dispatcher asked. "Negative. Just notify the hospital I'm coming in hot." As he sped through traffic, lights flashing, Mike glanced in the rearview mirror at the broken animal. "Stay with me," he urged, the words catching in his throat. "Just stay with me." He screeched into the hospital parking lot 14 minutes after his therapy appointment should have started. Dr. Emily Wilson and 2 technicians rushed out with a gurney. "Hit and run on Memorial Bridge," Mike explained as they transferred the dog. "Respiration shallow. Significant blood loss." "Doctor," Wilson nodded, already assessing the injuries. "We'll do everything we can. Officer, wait here." As they rushed the dog inside, Mike stood in the parking lot, blood staining his uniform. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Mitchell. "Missing our appointment means automatic recommendation for desk assignment. What happened?" He stared at the message, then at the hospital doors. In trying to save one dog, he might have just sacrificed his career. Somehow, he couldn't bring himself to care. 3 hours passed in the sterile waiting room of Pine Valley Animal Hospital. Mike had called Chief Thompson, explaining his absence from therapy. The conversation had been brief and cold. "You made your choice. Reynolds, we'll discuss your future tomorrow." Mike had hung up, his 17-year career seemingly balanced on the life of a dog he didn't know. The waiting room slowly emptied as other pet owners received news and departed, leaving Mike alone with his thoughts and the lingering scent of antiseptic. His uniform shirt, stiff with dried blood, was a grim reminder of another vigil 2 years ago. He'd waited then, too, hoping against hope, only to face the inevitable. The parallels weren't lost on him. At 7:42 p.m., the swinging doors opened, and Dr. Emily Wilson emerged. Her surgical scrubs bore evidence of the battle fought in the operating room, but it was her expression, a mixture of exhaustion and puzzlement, that caught Mike's attention as he rose to meet her. "He's stable," she said, removing her surgical cap to reveal auburn hair tied in a practical knot. It was touch and go, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, but he's a fighter. Mike felt his shoulders drop, releasing tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. "He'll make it, barring complications." "Yeah. But Officer Reynolds, there's something else." She hesitated, glancing around the empty waiting room before continuing in a lowered voice. "During surgery, we found something unusual." Mike followed her to a small consultation room where she closed the door and placed a metal dish on the table between them. Inside lay a small cylindrical object, no larger than a grain of rice. "At first I thought it was shrapnel from the accident, but it's too precise. It's some kind of tracking device professionally implanted beneath the skin between his shoulder blades." Mike leaned closer, studying the object. "Military grade," he said, recognizing the design from his canine handling days. "These aren't available to civilians." "That's not all," Dr. Wilson continued. "This dog has received professional training. His muscle development, dental work, everything suggests he's not just a pet, and there's evidence of previous surgical procedures." Mike's police instincts, dormant for too long, sparked to life. "What kind of procedures?" "Small incisions along the abdomen, professionally done and fully healed. I've only seen similar work in police dogs trained to detect narcotics." She met his gaze directly. "If I had to guess, I'd say someone was using this animal as a mule." A chill ran through Mike's body. Jefferson County had been battling a rising tide of opioid trafficking, with new synthetic variants arriving through channels that had baffled law enforcement. Could this dog be part of that network? "I'd like to see him," Mike said. Dr. Wilson led him through the quiet hospital to a recovery area where the German Shepherd lay on a padded bed, connected to IV fluids and monitoring equipment. Despite the bandages and the cone around his neck, the dog's resemblance to Rex was uncanny. Same coloration, similar build, even the white patch on his chest. As they approached, the dog's eyes opened alert despite the pain medication. When he saw Mike, his tail thumped weakly against the bed. "That's unusual," Dr. Wilson remarked. "He's been defensive with everyone else. Must sense something in you." Mike slowly extended his hand, letting the dog catch his scent. The animal licked his fingers once, then rested his head against Mike's palm, a gesture of trust that made his throat tighten. Their moment was interrupted by the reception desk calling Dr. Wilson to the phone. She excused herself, leaving Mike alone with the dog. "What happened to you, boy?" he murmured, gently stroking the animal's head. "Who's looking for you?" As if on cue, the front door chimed. Through the glass partition, Mike saw a well-dressed couple enter, speaking urgently to the receptionist. The woman pointed toward the recovery area, and the couple turned, making eye contact with Mike through the window. The man, tall with carefully styled gray hair and an expensive overcoat, smiled and approached with his blonde companion following closely. "Oh, thank God," the woman exclaimed. "We've been looking everywhere for him." Mike straightened, his hand still resting protectively on the dog's back. The German Shepherd's reaction was immediate and alarming. His body tensed, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "I'm James Carson," the man said, extending his hand. This is my wife, Linda. That's our Duke. He slipped his leash during our morning walk." "Quite a coincidence you found him on Memorial Bridge," Mike replied, not taking the offered hand. "That's 3 miles from the hiking trails." Something flickered behind Carson's smile, annoyance, perhaps, or calculation. He's quite the runner when he gets loose. "We have his papers in the car." Dr. Wilson returned, introducing herself to the couple. As they explained their ownership, she glanced at Mike, then at the dog's continued defensive posture. "We'll need to verify ownership before releasing him," she said carefully. "Standard procedure, especially with his injuries. Perhaps you could come back tomorrow with documentation." The couple exchanged a look before James Carson nodded. "Of course." First thing tomorrow. As they left, Mike noticed how the dog's tension eased. Something wasn't right. And every instinct told him that returning this dog to those people would be signing his death warrant. Whatever this animal knew or carried, it was worth killing for, and now Mike was involved. The next morning dawned gray and threatening rain as Mike sat in Chief Thompson's office, facing what he expected to be the end of his career. The chief, a barrel-chested man with 30 years on the force and perpetually tired eyes, studied Mike's written incident report with a deepening frown. "So, instead of attending your final evaluation with Dr. Mitchell, you stopped traffic on Memorial Bridge to rescue a dog," Thompson summarized, setting the report down. "A dog that you now believe may be connected to drug trafficking?" Mike nodded, maintaining eye contact. "Yes, sir. The tracking device is military grade, similar to what we used overseas. And the surgical scars are consistent with, spare me the speculation, Reynolds." Thompson interrupted, leaning back in his chair. The wood creaked in protest. "Dr. Mitchell has recommended permanent desk duty. Says your behavior shows continued avoidance and unhealthy fixation." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I've held your position open for 2 years. Mike, I can't keep doing it." "I understand, sir." Mike had expected this, had prepared for it on the sleepless night following his discovery. "I'd like to use my accumulated leave while the paperwork processes. 4 weeks should—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Officer Jessica Martinez, the department's tech specialist and youngest detective, entered with a folder. "Sorry to interrupt, Chief, but you should see this." She nodded respectfully to Mike before handing Thompson a set of photos. "Traffic camera footage from Memorial Bridge yesterday, just before Officer Reynolds' incident." Thompson flipped through the images, his expression shifting from irritation to interest. "Where did you get these?" "I pulled them while updating the accident report," Martinez explained. "Officer Reynolds mentioned suspicious activity prior to the dog being hit." The photos showed the silver sedan stopping, the driver clearly dropping something onto the road, and the timing perfectly aligned with the dog's appearance. "That looks deliberate," Thompson admitted, handing the photos to Mike. "Like they were luring the dog into traffic. The couple who showed up claiming ownership, James and Linda Carson, I ran their information." Martinez continued. "The address they provided is a vacant lot. Their vehicle registration leads to a shell company. And there's no record of dog license or vaccinations under their names." Mike studied the traffic camera photos, a cold feeling settling in his gut. They wanted this dog dead. The question is why? Chief Thompson regarded Mike thoughtfully. "You think this connects to our increased drug traffic?" "It's possible," Mike replied cautiously. "Doctor," Wilson found evidence of surgical procedures similar to those used on drug detection dogs. If someone found a way to use trained dogs as mules and... The chief drummed his fingers on the desk, deliberating. Martinez, what's your take? Officer Martinez straightened. The timing is suspicious. Sir, we've been unable to determine how the new synthetic opioids are entering Jefferson County. Traditional methods aren't working. Using trained animals would be innovative and difficult to detect. Thompson considered this, then made a decision. Martinez, continue investigating the Carsons, quietly. He turned to Mike. Reynolds, I'm approving 1 week of your leave, effective immediately. Use it to recover from your emotional distress over missing your therapy appointment. What you do with that time is your business. Mike recognized the unspoken arrangement, unofficial investigation. Plausible deniability. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. 1 week. And don't make me regret it. If this turns out to be nothing, your desk assignment stands dismissed. Outside the station, rain had begun to fall, matching Mike's somber mood. Officer Martinez followed him to his car. I didn't expect backup in there, Mike said, grateful but puzzled. Martinez shrugged, rain beating on her dark hair. I lost my brother to fentanyl 3 years ago. If something new is hitting our streets, I want it stopped. She handed him a thumb drive. Full traffic camera footage, plus what I found on the Carsons. I'll keep digging. Mike pocketed the drive. Thanks, Martinez. Jessica, she corrected with a small smile. Since you're technically on leave. His first stop was Pine Valley Animal Hospital, where Dr. Wilson greeted him with guarded relief. The Carsons called this morning, she informed him, leading him toward the recovery area. Very insistent about picking up Duke today. I stalled, saying he needed additional treatment. Good call, Mike said, sharing what Martinez had discovered about their false identities. The recovery room was quieter today, most of the overnight patients having been discharged. The German Shepherd, still hooked to IV fluids but more alert, lifted his head at Mike's approach. His tail immediately began a steady rhythm against the bedding. He's been watching the door all morning, Dr. Wilson remarked. It's like he was waiting for you. Mike sat beside the bed, allowing the dog to sniff his hand before gently stroking the uninjured parts of his neck. Has he had any other visitors? No, but our receptionist mentioned a car parked across the street most of the night. Dark sedan, 2 occupants. They were gone by morning shift. Mike nodded, unsurprised. Whoever wanted this dog wasn't giving up easily. I need to move him somewhere safer until I figure out what's going on. Dr. Wilson crossed her arms, looking uncertain. He's stable enough to be discharged, but he'll need ongoing care, pain management, wound cleaning, limited movement. I can handle it, Mike assured her. I have experience. Her expression softened. Your canine partner. I'd heard about that. She hesitated, then added, I have a colleague who runs a small practice from his home outside town, off the grid, mostly farm animals. I could arrange for the paperwork to show this dog was transferred there for continued treatment. Creating a false trail, Mike observed. That could be dangerous for you. Dr. Wilson met his gaze steadily. 3 months ago, we lost a 16-year-old to an overdose in our emergency clinic. New synthetic, nothing Narcan could touch. If this dog is connected to that supply chain, I want to help. An hour later, Mike's SUV pulled away from the hospital's service entrance. The German Shepherd secured in a crate in the back. Dr. Wilson had provided medications, bandages, and detailed care instructions, and the paperwork showed a transfer to Lakeside Veterinary Clinic, 30 miles in the opposite direction of Mike's cabin. At home, Mike created a comfortable recovery space in his living room, converting an old mattress into a dog bed and setting up water and food within easy reach. The German Shepherd explored his new surroundings cautiously, limping but determined. "You need a name," Mike said, watching him sniff each corner of the room. "Can't keep calling you Dog." He remembered how the animal had defied the odds, surviving both the hit and run and the surgery. "How about Survivor?" The dog looked up at the name, ears perked slightly. "Survivor it is," Mike decided. Settling on the couch with Martinez's thumb drive and his laptop, the footage confirmed his suspicions. The silver sedan had made 3 passes over the bridge before stopping to drop the food. The timing suggested they'd been waiting for the dog to appear, which meant they knew he would be there. The final pass showed a brief glint from what might have been a tracking device scanner. The limited background Martinez had compiled on the Carsons showed nothing beyond their fake address and the shell company. However, she'd included a note about increased police reports concerning missing dogs across 3 counties over the past 8 months. Mostly German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and other working breeds. Mike looked over at Survivor, who had settled on his bed, watching Mike with alert eyes. "What were you carrying, boy, and who are you running from?" For 3 days, Mike established a routine: mornings for Survivor's care and short, controlled walks in the secluded woods behind his cabin. Afternoons for investigation, combing through missing dog reports, researching trafficking methods, and regular check-ins with Martinez, who continued building their case from inside the department. On the 4th day, Martinez called with news. "I pulled toll records for the silver sedan," she began without preamble. "It's made regular trips between Pine Valley and Riverton Heights over the past 6 months, always on the same schedule. Every 3rd Thursday, crossing Memorial Bridge between 2:00 and 3:00 p.m. Mike recognized the pattern immediately. "Drug delivery schedule. That's my guess. And get this, I cross-referenced the missing dog reports with dates of these trips. 3 dogs disappeared the day before scheduled crossings." A theory was forming in Mike's mind. Grim, but increasingly plausible. They're recruiting new mules for each delivery. Use them once, then dispose of the evidence. Martinez finished. "The Carsons haven't returned to the animal hospital, but they've been asking around town about a wounded German Shepherd. They're offering a $5,000 reward for information." "They're getting desperate," Mike noted, watching Survivor doze on his bed. The dog's recovery was progressing well. He was more mobile now, though still favoring his injured leg. "What about the tracking device? Military surplus, according to my contact. Sold in bulk to a company called Elite Security Solutions 3 years ago. They're based in Riverton Heights. Can you get me an employee list?" "Already working on it. There's something else." Martinez's voice lowered. "The chief is getting pressure from above. Questions about why you're on leave, what you're working on. Someone's attention has been caught." Mike wasn't surprised. If this operation had political protection, his investigation would have triggered alarms. "Watch your back, Jessica. Don't take unnecessary risks." After hanging up, Mike sat with Survivor, gently checking his healing wounds while processing this new information. The dog leaned into his touch, a level of trust that had grown steadily over their days together. When Mike removed the bandages to clean the surgical site, he noticed something he'd missed before tiny, faded numbers tattooed inside the animal's ear. "Military identification," he murmured, recognizing the format from his own service days. This wasn't just any trained dog. Survivor had been a military working dog, likely retired or, worse, stolen. That night, as a thunderstorm rolled through the valley, Mike was awakened by Survivor's low growl. The dog stood rigid by the bedroom window, hackles raised, staring into the darkness. Mike reached for his service weapon, moving silently to peer through the curtains. A flashlight beam cut through the rain, sweeping across his property from the tree line. Someone was searching the perimeter of his cabin. As lightning flashed, Mike caught a glimpse of the intruder. Tall, military posture, professional movements. Not the Carsons, but someone with training. Mike slipped to the back door, motioning for Survivor to stay. The dog watched him with anxious eyes but obeyed, a further testament to his professional training. Outside, the rain provided cover as Mike circled behind the intruder, who was now examining the locks on his front door. "Police, don't move!" Mike shouted. "Weapon raised!" The figure spun, dropping to a shooter's stance with alarming speed. The flashlight beam hit Mike's eyes, momentarily blinding him. He heard the distinctive sound of a weapon being cocked. "Reynolds," a man's voice called, incredulous. "Michael Reynolds?" Mike blinked against the light, keeping his weapon steady. "Identify yourself." The flashlight lowered slightly, revealing a face Mike hadn't seen in over 3 years. Captain David Harlow, his former commanding officer from his military K-9 unit. "Stand down, Reynolds," Harlow ordered, using the same authoritative tone from their service days. "We need to talk about the dog you're harboring." Rain drummed against the roof of Mike's cabin as he and Captain Harlow sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Survivor lay in the doorway between them and the living room, his amber eyes fixed intently on the visitor, body tense despite his injuries. 3 years without a word, and I find you breaking into my property in the middle of the night," Mike said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He'd holstered his weapon but kept it accessible, former commanding officer or not. Harlow's sudden appearance set off warning bells. "I wasn't certain it was you until I ran the plates on your SUV," Harlow replied, his military posture unchanged by civilian clothes. His hair was shorter than Mike remembered, his face more lined, but the calculating eyes remained the same. "When our tracking system showed the dog at this location, I expected to find our thieves, not a former handler." "Your tracking system," Mike repeated, sliding a mug across the table. "That explains the military-grade implant. What I can't figure out is why a retired captain is hunting down a dog with such dedication." Harlow's expression remained neutral as he sipped his coffee. "I run a private security firm now, Elite Security Solutions. We train specialized dogs for various clients' corporations, wealthy individuals, some government contracts. 3 weeks ago, one of our top assets was stolen during transport. The dog you're calling Survivor." "Let me guess," Mike interjected. "Your client was James Carson." A flicker of surprise crossed Harlow's face before he masked it. "How did you come across that name?" They showed up at the animal hospital claiming ownership, with a very practiced story and documentation. Mike leaned forward. What they didn't have was any actual connection to this dog. He was terrified of them. Harlow set down his mug with deliberate care. The Carsons are simply intermediaries. The actual client prefers to remain anonymous. Convenient, Mike observed. Almost as convenient as the tracking device that didn't lead you to Survivor until he was hit by a car on Memorial Bridge. A hit and run that looked suspiciously staged. That's a serious accusation. Reynolds, I have the traffic camera footage. Someone deliberately luring him into traffic with food. Perfectly timed. If I hadn't been there, he'd be dead, which I'm starting to think was the point. The two men stared at each other across the table, the easy camaraderie of their military days long gone. In its place was something harder, a mutual assessment of threat and credibility. Finally, Harlow sighed. The transponder malfunctioned 3 days after the theft. We had only intermittent signals, general vicinity at best. By the time we narrowed it to the bridge area, he glanced at Survivor. We didn't orchestrate any hit and run. That's not our method. Then whose method is it? Mike pressed. Before Harlow could answer, Mike's phone vibrated with a text from Jessica Martinez. Need to meet. Dam overlook. 1 hour. Urgent. Mike slid the phone into his pocket. You were explaining about your methods. Harlow's eyes narrowed at the interruption. Our dogs are valuable investments, extensively trained. The goal was recovery, not elimination. He studied Mike's expression. You don't believe me. What I believe, Mike said carefully, is that this dog was being used to smuggle drugs into Jefferson County. The surgical scars, the precise timing of travel across Memorial Bridge, it fits a pattern we've been tracking. That's impossible, Harlow stated flatly. Our dogs are trained for protection and detection, not as mules. Despite his denial, something flickered in his eyes, concern or perhaps calculation. Then you won't mind if I verify that with local law enforcement, Mike suggested. I'm sure they'd be interested in interviewing your clients about their repeated trips across Memorial Bridge. Harlow's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. I'll handle the internal investigation myself. That's not how this works. Captain, Survivor is evidence in an ongoing investigation. When that concludes, we can discuss his future. The former captain stood, his posture rigid. You're making a mistake. Reynolds, there are aspects to this situation you don't understand. Then enlighten me. Harlow moved toward the door. I can't. Not yet. But I strongly advise you to keep a low profile. For your own safety. Is that a threat? A professional courtesy from one former soldier to another. Harlow paused at the door. I'll be in touch. And Reynolds, that dog is worth more than you realize. Guard him carefully. After Harlow departed, Mike knelt beside Survivor, checking his bandages while processing the encounter. The dog nuzzled his hand, a gesture of trust that contrasted sharply with his reaction to the visitor. He's hiding something, Mike murmured. The question is, what? 40 minutes later, Mike parked at Jefferson Dam Overlook, a secluded spot where the river narrowed through a rocky channel. The storm had passed, leaving a glistening landscape under a quarter moon. Survivor, who had insisted on accompanying him with plaintive whines when Mike prepared to leave alone, sat alert in the passenger seat. Martinez's sedan was already there, parked at the far end of the lookout. Mike approached cautiously, instincts heightened after Harlow's warning. When he reached her vehicle, Martinez rolled down her window, her expression tense in the dim light. "Get in," she said. "I don't want to be seen talking to you." Inside her car, Martinez passed him a file. "Employee records from Elite Security Solutions, plus their client list. My contact at the county records office came through." Her voice was tight, professional, but Mike detected underlying anxiety. "What else?" he prompted. Martinez glanced at her rearview mirror before continuing. "I identified the Carsons. Real names James and Linda Mercer. He's former military. Dishonorable discharge for suspected contraband trafficking in Afghanistan. She has connections to pharmaceutical distribution." Mike flipped through the file, stopping at a familiar name. "David Harlow is the CEO of Elite." "Yes. And here's where it gets interesting." Martinez pointed to a contract listing. "Elite provides security dogs to Highland Pharmaceuticals, which is owned by William Harrington, Pine Valley's largest political donor and head of the County Commerce Board." "Harrington," Mike repeated, the name clicking into place. "He pushed for the pharmaceutical distribution center outside town last year." "The one that operates 24/7 with minimal oversight." "Exactly. And guess who handles their private security, Elite?" Martinez pulled out another document. "I ran financial records every 3 months. Highland makes a payment to Elite for specialized security services double their regular monthly fee, coinciding with the new drug shipments hitting our streets." Mike noted, "There's more. I found veterinary records for 6 German Shepherds registered to Highland's Security Division, all with the same attending veterinarian, Dr. Thomas Gardner." "Gardner," Mike frowned. "He has that private practice on the west side." Martinez nodded. "And privileges at Pine Valley Animal Hospital, where he consults on surgical cases." She hesitated. "Where your dog was treated." "Dr. Wilson performed the surgery," Mike clarified. "But hospital records show Gardner was called in for a consultation afterward. He had access to Survivor before you took him home." The implications were clear. Gardner had seen the tracking device, likely reported back to whoever wanted Survivor found. "We need to move carefully," Mike said. "If Harrington is involved, he has influence throughout the county." Martinez's expression grew more troubled. "That's why I wanted to meet in person. Chief Thompson was called to an emergency meeting with the county commissioner this afternoon. When he returned, he asked for all files related to the Memorial Bridge incident and our missing dog investigations." "He seemed supportive before," Mike said, though doubt crept into his voice. "I think he was. But something changed at that meeting." She met his gaze directly. "They know we're onto something, Mike, and they're closing ranks." On the drive back to his cabin, Mike's mind raced with connections and possibilities. Harlow's security firm, Harrington's pharmaceutical company, Gardner's veterinary access, and at the center, trained dogs moving drugs through a system designed to detect them. "The perfect smuggling operation," he muttered to Survivor, who watched him with attentive eyes. "Use the very animals trained to find drugs to transport them instead." As he turned onto the secluded road leading to his cabin, Mike noticed a vehicle parked among the trees, a black SUV with tinted windows. He drove past his driveway, continuing down the road before pulling onto a logging track that circled back toward his property through the woods. "Stay close," he whispered to Survivor as they approached the cabin on foot. The dog moved silently beside him despite his injuries, training overriding pain through the trees. Mike spotted 2 men searching his property. Their methodical movements and communication style suggested military or law enforcement background. Not Harlow's men, their aggressive approach lacked his precision. Mike retreated deeper into the woods. Guiding Survivor toward an old hunting blind he maintained half a mile from the cabin. Once inside the simple structure, he called Martinez. "My place is being searched," he reported quietly. "2 professionals. Unknown affiliation." "Damn it," Martinez breathed. "Stay away. I'll try to send a patrol car out." "No," Mike interrupted. "If Harrington has reached the department, official response might make things worse. I need somewhere to regroup." A moment's hesitation. Then, "My brother's fishing cabin at Crescent Lake. It's been empty since he passed. I'll text you the address and security code." "Thank you. What about you?" "I've been careful. All my research is routed through secure channels. As far as anyone knows, I'm just following up on missing dog reports." Her voice hardened. "But I'm close to something. Mike, the payment records between Highland and Elite don't match their contract terms. There's a second account. Offshore. I need another day to trace it. Be careful, Jessica. These people aren't hesitating to eliminate problems." The fishing cabin was modest but secure, situated on the less developed north shore of Crescent Lake. Mike settled Survivor inside, then made a careful circuit of the perimeter, establishing escape routes and vantage points. The dog seemed to understand the danger, staying alert but quiet, using the cabin's ancient desktop computer. Mike reviewed Martinez's files. Elite Security Solutions had been founded by Harlow 3 years ago, shortly after his retirement from the military. Its client list included corporations, wealthy individuals, and government contractors, all seemingly legitimate. Highland Pharmaceuticals became a client 18 months ago, coinciding with the construction of their distribution center in Jefferson County, and coinciding with the first wave of new synthetic opioids hitting the streets. Mike cross-referenced the dates of reported dog thefts with Highland's payment schedule to Elite. The pattern was unmistakable: new dogs acquired before each major payment, but no record of what happened to them afterward, until Survivor escaped. Early the next morning, Martinez called. "I found it," she said without preamble. "Highland's offshore account makes regular payments to a shell company that owns a property 10 miles outside Pine Valley. An old factory site, supposedly abandoned after environmental violations shut it down 3 years ago." "But it's not abandoned," Mike guessed. "Satellite imagery shows regular activity, vehicles, personnel, and, get this, Doctor, Gardner visits twice weekly, according to his cell phone GPS data. Training facility," Mike concluded. "Where they prepare the dogs." "I think so. But there's something else." Martinez's voice dropped. "I accessed Dr. Gardner's private files. He's developed a surgical technique for creating internal pouches within the abdominal cavities of large dogs, pouches that can hold sealed packages." Mike looked at Survivor, understanding dawning. "And the dogs are trained to remain calm during security checks because they're already trained detection animals?" "Exactly. Security personnel would never suspect their own detection dogs. It's the perfect cover." "What about the other dogs?" Mike asked, dreading the answer. Martinez's pause told him everything. Gardner's records include disposal procedures after single use. They don't survive the extraction process." Mike felt sick. "We need to move on that factory. There might be other dogs there right now. I've prepared everything for Chief Thompson. With this evidence—" "Wait," Mike interrupted. "We don't know who at the department might be compromised. Take it directly to the state police. Ask for Detective Sarah Larson. She's solid, and she has jurisdiction over cross-county drug trafficking." "That's going to burn every bridge I have here," Martinez said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Some bridges need burning." Her determination came through clearly. "I'll contact Larson. What about you?" Mike studied Survivor, who watched him with unwavering trust. "I'm going to that factory. Tonight." "Mike?" "No. Wait for backup. This operation has serious protection. And while we wait, more dogs die. I can't let that happen." Mike's decision was made. "I'll just do reconnaissance if I find evidence of active operations. I'll document it and pull back." "At least let me send you the layout," Martinez conceded, recognizing the futility of arguing. "I pulled property records and historical satellite images." After ending the call, Mike knelt beside Survivor. "I need to check out this facility. You should stay here. Rest those injuries." The dog's eyes never left his, and when Mike moved toward the door, Survivor limped determinedly after him. "You're not at full strength," Mike warned. Survivor sat by the door, his posture making his intention clear wherever Mike went. He would follow. "All right," Mike relented. "But you stay in the car unless absolutely necessary." Dusk was settling over Jefferson County as Mike parked a half-mile from the abandoned factory, concealing his vehicle in a dense stand of trees. The facility stood isolated at the end of a dirt-access road, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. From his vantage point, using binoculars, Mike counted 3 vehicles in the parking area: a black SUV similar to the one at his cabin, a white van with no markings, and an expensive sedan he recognized immediately, William Harrington's Bentley. "Looks like we found the operations headquarters," Mike murmured to Survivor, who sat alert in the passenger seat. Martinez's satellite images had revealed a main building with several outbuildings, one of which showed heat signatures consistent with kennel facilities. Mike plotted a route that would keep him concealed by the tree line until he reached the rear of the property, where security appeared lightest. "Stay," he commanded Survivor firmly, securing the vehicle. The dog whined but remained in place, watching anxiously as Mike disappeared into the gathering darkness. The perimeter security was professional, but not impenetrable. Mike identified a section where the fence met a drainage culvert, creating a narrow gap beneath. He squeezed through, remaining in the shadows as he approached the building Martinez had identified as the likely kennel. Low, rhythmic barking confirmed her assessment. Moving carefully between security camera blind spots, Mike reached a window and peered inside. What he saw froze his blood. 6 dogs. German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois were housed in separate kennels. Each wore a medical vest covering fresh surgical sites. A man in scrubs, presumably Dr. Gardner, was examining one animal while an assistant prepared an injection. On a nearby table lay surgical equipment and several small, sealed packages, the synthetic opioids, ready for implantation. Mike documented everything with his phone, capturing clear images of the operation, the drugs, and the distinctive markings on each package. As he shifted position to photograph the facility's layout, his foot dislodged a loose stone. The sound was small, but in the quiet evening, it carried, inside, one of the dogs, alerted, barking sharply in Mike's direction. The assistant looked up, peering toward the window. Mike pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding. He counted to 30, then risked another look. The room was empty. the lights now off. They'd heard something and were investigating. Time to retreat. Mike began making his way back toward the fence line, staying low and using the outbuildings for cover. He had reached the last structure when floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire compound. "We have an intruder on the southwest perimeter," a voice announced over loudspeakers. "Security teams converge and detain." Mike broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind him, he heard shouts and the sound of vehicles starting. Ahead, two figures appeared, blocking his path to the fence gap. Both held weapons. He veered toward a stand of trees, seeking cover, when the distinctive sound of a dog's bark cut through the chaos not from the kennel, but from the direction of his vehicle. Survivor had escaped and was racing toward him, moving with surprising speed despite his injuries. The security personnel turned toward the new threat, momentarily distracted. Mike seized the opportunity, tackling the nearest guard while Survivor charged the second, knocking the man off balance with a practiced takedown. "Good boy," Mike gasped, retrieving a dropped weapon. "Let's go." They ran for the fence line, Mike firing a warning shot behind them to discourage immediate pursuit. At the culvert, he helped Survivor squeeze through first, then followed, tearing his jacket on the barbed wire. More shouts, closer now. Flashlight beams cut through the trees as they sprinted toward the hidden vehicle. Mike's lungs burned, and beside him, Survivor was beginning to favor his injured leg again, the desperate run taking its toll. They reached the SUV just as headlights appeared on the access road. Mike helped Survivor into the back seat before jumping behind the wheel and starting the engine. Instead of using the main road, he crashed through underbrush onto a logging track that Martinez had marked on her map rough but navigable. And, crucially, unexpected. The SUV bounced violently over the uneven terrain, headlights off to avoid detection. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, but Mike maintained his speed, knowing they'd soon realize his escape route. "We got it, boy," he told Survivor, who lay panting in the back. "We got the evidence. Now we just need to get it to the right people." As they emerged onto a county road 5 miles from the factory, Mike allowed himself a moment of hope. They had documented the operation. Martinez was contacting state authorities. Soon, this nightmare would end. Then his phone rang Jessica Martinez's number. "Mike," her voice was tight with fear, "they found me. Thompson knows everything. They're calling it conspiracy. Evidence tampering. Where are you? County jail. They're processing me now." Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "They took everything, my files, my laptop. They'll be coming for you next. And Mike Harrington was here, watching my booking. This goes higher than we thought." The call ended abruptly. Mike gripped the steering wheel. Mind racing. With Martinez detained and her evidence confiscated, his phone now held the only proof of Highland's operation. And if Thompson had turned, the entire sheriff's department might be compromised. "Change of plans," he told Survivor, turning toward Memorial Bridge, the fastest route out of the county. "We need to get to State Police headquarters." As he accelerated, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. A vehicle was gaining rapidly, the black SUV from the factory. Mike pressed the gas pedal to the floor, but on the winding country road, the pursuing vehicle continued closing the gap. He was still 5 minutes from Memorial Bridge when the SUV rammed his rear bumper, sending his vehicle fishtailing. Mike fought for control. Straightening out just as they approached a sharp curve, the pursuing vehicle accelerated alongside, trying to force him off the road. Through the passenger window, Mike caught a glimpse of the driver, William Harrington himself, his distinguished face twisted with fury as he swerved toward Mike's vehicle again. The impact sent Mike's SUV crashing through the guardrail. For one sickening moment, they were airborne. Then came the impact with the hillside below, the world turning upside down as the vehicle rolled. Metal tore, glass shattered, and beside him, Survivor yelped in pain. When the motion finally stopped, Mike hung suspended by his seatbelt, blood trickling down his face. Through the shattered windshield, he saw headlights on the road above, car doors opening, figures descending toward the wreck. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered to Survivor, who lay motionless beside him. "Stay with me." Pain brought Mike back to consciousness sharp. Insistent pain in his left shoulder and a dull throbbing in his head. He blinked against harsh fluorescent lights, gradually recognizing the antiseptic smell and beeping monitors of a hospital room. Memory returned in fragments: the factory, the chase, the crash. He tried to sit up, panic rising. "Survivor!" he gasped, the effort sending fresh pain through his ribs. "Easy, Reynolds," a familiar voice cautioned. Chief Thompson stepped into view, his weathered face grim. "You've got 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. Doctor says you're lucky to be alive." Mike ignored the warning, struggling against the restraint of IV lines and monitoring cables. "Where's the dog? Where's Survivor?" Thompson's expression hardened. "That should be the least of your concerns right now. You're facing serious charges: trespassing, interfering with a police investigation, assault on private security personnel." The events before the crash came rushing back. Martinez arrested, Thompson compromised, Harrington running him off the road. Mike studied his former superior, looking for tells. Was he here as an ally, or to ensure Mike stayed contained? "Jessica Martinez," Mike said, watching Thompson's reaction carefully. "Is she all right?" A flicker of something regret perhaps crossed the chief's face. "Officer Martinez has been suspended pending investigation into misuse of police resources and fabricating evidence." "Fabricating?" Mike's voice rose, setting off a fresh wave of pain. "We found the operation, Thompson, dogs being used as drug mules, Harrington, elite security, Dr. Gardner, they're all involved. I have proof on my phone." "Your phone wasn't recovered from the accident site," Thompson stated flatly. "And the stories you and Martinez have constructed about respected community members trafficking drugs through dogs. It sounds like delusion, Mike, the kind that confirms every concern. Dr. Mitchell raised about your mental state." Mike fell silent, processing this information, his phone missing, Martinez discredited, and himself now painted as unstable. The perfect containment strategy. "And Survivor?" he asked again, quieter now. Thompson sighed, relenting slightly. "Animal control took the dog. Standard procedure after an accident involving an animal without clear ownership." "He saved my life," Mike said, remembering Survivor's desperate run to help him at the factory. "I need to make sure he's safe." "What you need is to start thinking about your defense," Thompson countered. "William Harrington is pressing charges for defamation on top of everything else. He claims you've been harassing his security personnel and trespassing on his property due to paranoid delusions." "Harrington ran me off the road," Mike insisted. "He was chasing me after I documented his operation. Witnesses place Harrington at a charity gala during the time of your accident. Thompson replied, his tone suggesting the matter was settled. "The vehicle that reportedly chased you hasn't been found." Of course it hadn't. People with Harrington's resources could make evidence disappear and create alibis at will. Mike closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts. If his phone was missing and Martinez's evidence confiscated, what remained of their case, the tracking device? Doctor? Wilson had removed it from Survivor during surgery. If they could prove its military origin and connection to Elite. "I need to speak with Dr. Emily Wilson from Pine Valley Animal Hospital," Mike said, opening his eyes with renewed focus. "That's not going to happen," Thompson replied. "You're under guard until formal charges are filed. No visitors except legal counsel." The door opened, and a nurse entered to check Mike's vitals. Thompson stepped back, adding in a lower voice, "For what it's worth, I don't believe you staged that accident. Something about this situation stinks." His expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes conveyed a message he wasn't entirely convinced by the official narrative. 24-hour guard?" Mike asked, as the nurse adjusted his IV. Thompson nodded. "Sheriff's deputy outside your door at all times." After Thompson and the nurse departed, Mike stared at the ceiling, cataloging his options. His injuries were painful but not debilitating. The window showed it was night, reducing visibility outside. The monitoring equipment would alert the nurse's station if disconnected, but perhaps not immediately. Most importantly, Thompson's subtle message suggested he might not be fully compromised, perhaps just pressured into following orders. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hours passed. Mike pretended to sleep whenever the night nurse checked on him, watching through barely open eyes as she recorded his vitals and adjusted medications. Shortly after 2 a.m., during a shift change, he made his move. Carefully disconnecting the monitoring cables, Mike used the adhesive backing from medical tape to secure them to each other, maintaining the electrical connection that would prevent immediate alarms. He removed his IV with practiced precision, applying pressure to prevent bleeding, then gathered his clothes from the small closet. The pain was substantial but manageable as he dressed. Years of military training helped him compartmentalize the discomfort, focusing instead on the task at hand. After the factory and the crash, Harrington would expect him to lie low, recover. That expectation created an opportunity. Mike eased open the bathroom window, thankful for older hospital architecture that prioritized ventilation over security. The ground was 2 floors below, but a maintenance ladder on the adjacent wall provided a viable route. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his shoulder, he squeezed through the opening. The deputy stationed outside his room would discover his absence during the next check, giving Mike perhaps 30 minutes before a full alert. Not much time, but enough to make it to the one person who might still have evidence that could save Survivor and expose Harrington's operation. As he dropped to the ground and slipped into the shadows, Mike's determination hardened. Harrington had resources, political connections, and the benefit of respectability. But Mike had something more important, the truth. And somewhere in Pine Valley, a small metal tracking device that could prove it. Martinez had been right about one thing: some bridges needed burning. By morning, Mike Reynolds would either have the evidence needed to bring down Harrington's operation or find himself permanently branded a criminal. Either way, there would be no going back. Pine Valley at 3 a.m. was a ghost town, streetlights casting long shadows across empty sidewalks as Mike made his way through back alleys and side streets. Each step sent pain radiating through his ribs. his dislocated shoulder now crudely stabilized with his belt fashioned into a makeshift sling. He'd avoided main roads and surveillance cameras, acutely aware that his hospital escape had likely triggered a county-wide alert by now. The animal hospital loomed ahead, dark except for security lighting around the perimeter. During his frequent visits with Survivor, Mike had noted the building's layout, including the staff entrance with its keypad lock. Getting inside wouldn't be easy, but it was his only option if Dr. Wilson had preserved the tracking device as evidence. As he approached from the rear parking lot, movement near the staff entrance caught his attention. A figure emerged from shadows petite, auburn hair visible even in the dim light. Dr. Emily Wilson herself, locking up after some late-night emergency. Mike hesitated. Approaching her directly risked involving her in his fugitive status. But time was running out. Before he could decide, Wilson turned and froze, spotting him in the shadows. "Officer Reynolds," she called softly, voice tinged with disbelief. "My God, they said you were in the hospital with serious injuries." Mike stepped forward, keeping his voice low. "I need your help. Dr. Wilson, it's about Survivor and the device you removed." Her eyes widened as she took in his condition, the crude sling, the blood seeping through his shirt, the bruises darkening on his face. Without hesitation, she gestured toward her car. "Get in. We can't talk here." Minutes later, they sat in Wilson's modest living room, her medical bag open as she examined his injuries with professional detachment. "You've torn stitches," she admonished, applying antiseptic to his reopened wounds. "And your shoulder needs proper treatment. What happened to you?" Mike winced as she cleaned a particularly deep cut. "Harrington ran me off the road after I discovered his operation. Dogs are being surgically modified to smuggle drugs through security checkpoints. Survivor escaped from them." Wilson's hands stilled. "That actually makes sense. The surgical scars I found weren't consistent with any standard veterinary procedure." She met his gaze directly. "The police came to the hospital yesterday. They confiscated Survivor's medical records and questioned me about your interest in him." "Did they ask about the tracking device?" "No." A small smile crossed her face. "And I didn't volunteer that information. Something felt wrong about the whole situation, especially after what you'd told me about the Carsons." Hope flickered within Mike for the first time since the crash. "Do you still have it?" Wilson moved to a small safe concealed behind a landscape painting. "I kept it as a precaution, professional curiosity. I told myself." She removed a small evidence bag containing the cylindrical device. "I also saved blood and tissue samples from Survivor. His blood work showed trace amounts of synthetic opioids in his system." Mike carefully took the tracking device, turning it over in his palm. "This is military grade, produced exclusively for the Department of Defense and their contractors. If we can prove it came from elite security and was implanted without proper authorization, it would support your allegations about the smuggling operation," Wilson finished. "But from what you've described, Harrington has considerable influence. Who would you even take this to?" The question hung in the air, highlighting their predicament. Local law enforcement was compromised. Martinez was in custody, and Mike was now a fugitive. Who, indeed? "There's someone," Mike said finally. "Detective Sarah Larson with the state police. Martinez was planning to contact her before she was arrested. Larson has jurisdiction over cross-county drug trafficking and no connections to Pine Valley politics." Wilson considered this. "How do you reach her without being arrested yourself? Your face is probably on every police bulletin by now." I need to find Survivor first. Mike insisted. Animal control has him, and if Harrington realizes that connection... He didn't need to finish the thought. If Harrington's operation had infiltrated the sheriff's department, animal control wouldn't be far behind. Survivor might already be in danger. The county shelter opens at 7 a.m., Wilson said, checking her watch. That gives us 3 hours to formulate a plan. She hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know. After you took Survivor home, Dr. Gardner came asking questions about him, specific questions about surgical anomalies and where I'd sent him for recovery. Gardner, Mike repeated, the name igniting fresh anger. He's the veterinarian performing the implantation surgeries at the factory. Did he seem suspicious of your answers? I don't think so. I stuck to the transfer paperwork story. Wilson's expression darkened. If what you're saying is true, how many dogs have they? She couldn't finish the sentence. Too many, Mike replied grimly. And there are more at that facility right now. That's why we need to move quickly. Wilson made coffee while Mike examined the tracking device more carefully. Under her desk lamp, tiny markings became visible on the metal casing, a serial number and manufacturing code. If they could trace this specific unit to elite security, it would establish a concrete link. I've been thinking, Wilson said, setting a mug beside him. The county shelter would have processed Survivor through their standard intake. That means photographs, microchip scanning, and a medical assessment all entered into their database. Mike looked up. You have access to that database. Emergency veterinary privileges for identifying injured animals brought to the hospital. She opened her laptop. It might not tell us if he's still there, but it will confirm if he was processed. While Wilson accessed the system, Mike made a difficult call using her landline. Chief Thompson had seemed unconvinced by the official narrative at the hospital. It was a risk, but one worth taking. The phone rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. Thompson? It's Reynolds. A pause, then, You're making a serious mistake. Reynolds, turn yourself in before this gets worse. I need to know something first, Mike pressed. Survivor the German Shepherd from my accident. Is he still at animal control? Another pause, longer this time. When Thompson spoke again, his voice was quieter. No, he was transferred early this morning on special authorization. Above my pay grade. Mike's heart sank. Transferred where? I don't know. The paperwork cited specialized facility for evidence animals, but listed no specific location. Thompson's tone shifted slightly. Martinez is being released. By the way, lack of evidence to hold her. Harrington's influence only goes so far. Apparently. A small victory, at least. Thank you. Chief. I didn't tell you anything, Reynolds. And if you have any sense left, you'll turn yourself in before crossing paths with Harrington again. He's not someone who leaves loose ends. The line went dead. Mike relayed the conversation to Wilson, who looked up from her computer with concern. Survivor was processed at 2:14 a.m. yesterday. Initial examination notes mention his surgical scars and healing injuries. She scrolled further. The transfer authorization was signed by Dr. Thomas Gardner at 5:30 a.m. today, citing continuing medical concerns requiring specialized care. Gardner, Mike muttered. He's taking Survivor back to the factory. There's something else, Wilson continued, pointing to the screen. The intake photos show Survivor wearing a new collar with a rectangular tag. It's not standard shelter identification. Mike examined the image, recognition dawning. That's a GPS tracker, more advanced than the implant, designed for real-time monitoring. His military experience with similar systems told him exactly what this meant. They're using him as bait, hoping he'll lead them to me or any evidence I've collected. Then they know you survived the crash, Wilson concluded. And they know I'm still a threat. Mike's mind raced through the implications. Harrington was cleaning house, eliminating evidence, controlling the narrative, and now using Survivor to locate the final loose end. Mike himself. We need to reach Detective Larson immediately, Wilson urged. Mike shook his head. Not yet. If we contact her without concrete evidence linking Harrington to the operation, it becomes my word against his. A disgraced officer with alleged mental health issues versus a respected businessman. But we have the tracking device, the blood samples, circumstantial at best. We need something definitive. Mike studied the intake photo again, and I think I know how to get it. The plan that formed was dangerous but direct. If Harrington was using Survivor as bait, Mike would spring the trap, but on his terms, with preparations in place to ensure the evidence reached the right people regardless of the outcome. Over the next hour, they worked methodically. Wilson documented the tracking device and blood samples, creating detailed records that included her professional assessment of Survivor's unusual surgical modifications. Mike recorded a comprehensive statement detailing everything he'd witnessed, from the initial incident on Memorial Bridge through the discovery at the factory and the subsequent cover-up attempts. They copied all files to multiple secure locations with instructions for automatic delivery to Detective Larson, federal authorities, and selected media outlets if regular check-ins ceased. It wasn't foolproof, but it created a dead man's switch that might deter Harrington from taking drastic action once confronted. "This is insane," Wilson said as dawn approached. "You're still injured, without backup or official authority. Harrington will have security, alibis, everything prepared." "Probably," Mike agreed, checking the prepaid phone they'd purchased for the operation. "But he has one critical weakness: arrogance. He believes he's untouchable, that systems will protect him as they always have." He looked up at Wilson. "People like that make mistakes when confronted directly." She wasn't convinced. "And if this goes wrong, then the evidence we've prepared goes to Larson automatically. Harrington's operation is exposed either way." He held her gaze. "But I need to try to save Survivor. After everything he's been through, everything he did to help me, I can't abandon him now." Wilson studied him for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You've already risked enough." "I'm a veterinarian. Reynolds," she interrupted firmly. "If Survivor or any other dogs are being held at that facility, they'll need medical attention. Besides, my professional credentials might give us access that you alone couldn't manage." The logic was sound, even if it increased the stakes. "If we do this, we follow the plan exactly. At the first sign of serious danger, you leave. The evidence reaching Larson is more important than either of us." "Agreed," Wilson said, though her expression suggested she might have her own ideas about that arrangement. As sunrise painted Pine Valley in golden light, they finalized preparations. The tracking device was secured in a waterproof container, hidden where Harrington's men wouldn't think to look. The documentation was encrypted and scheduled for automatic distribution. Mike had cleaned and bandaged his wounds as best he could, knowing the coming confrontation would test his already limited physical reserves. "There's one more thing," Wilson said, retrieving a small case from her medical bag. "Painkillers and antibiotics. You'll need them to function." Mike accepted the medication, swallowing the pills dry. "How long until they take effect?" 20 minutes for the pain relief. The antibiotics will take longer." She checked her watch. "It's nearly 7 a.m. Gardner would have taken Survivor to the factory by now." "Then that's where we're going." Mike stood, wincing as his body protested the movement. One direct confrontation, documented evidence of their operation, and immediate contact with Detective Larson. Wilson gathered her medical bag, adding extra supplies for potential canine injuries. "And if Harrington is expecting you?" Mike moved toward the door, determination overriding pain. "He is, but he's expecting a desperate, injured fugitive backed into a corner, not someone with a plan, and nothing left to lose." As they loaded Wilson's car, the rising sun illuminated Memorial Bridge in the distance, the place where this had all begun with one dog's desperate dash for freedom. Soon, they would know if that moment of chance had set in motion the downfall of Harrington's operation or merely claimed more victims in its machinery. Either way, there would be no more running. Today would end with truth or tragedy, with no middle ground remaining. Morning mist clung to the abandoned factory grounds as Wilson's sedan approached via the logging road Mike had used to escape 2 nights earlier. They parked a quarter-mile away, concealed among dense pines, and proceeded on foot. Wilson carried her medical bag while Mike, moving stiffly but with renewed purpose thanks to the painkillers, led the way with practiced caution. "3 vehicles in the lot," he whispered as they reached the edge of the tree line. "Gardner's BMW, a security SUV, and Harrington's Bentley." Wilson adjusted her grip on the medical bag. "They're all here. That confirms your theory about using Survivor as bait." "But they don't know we're aware of that," Mike reminded her. "That's our advantage." Their plan was straightforward but dangerous. Wilson would approach the front gate openly, citing a veterinary emergency call about injured dogs. Her professional credentials might grant access, or at least create a distraction. Meanwhile, Mike would use the same drainage culvert from his previous entry to infiltrate the facility, locate Survivor, and gather final documentation of the operation before they contacted Detective Larson. "Remember?" Mike said, checking the prepaid phone. "If anything goes wrong, get to your car and drive straight to the state police barracks in Riverton. Don't wait. Don't look back." Wilson nodded, her face pale but determined. "Be careful. Reynolds, those ribs won't take much more abuse." They separated, Wilson walking confidently toward the main entrance while Mike circled to the property's rear perimeter. The morning shift change would work in their favor, creating momentary gaps in security coverage. At the culvert, Mike dropped to his stomach, fighting against the protest of his injured ribs as he squeezed beneath the fence. Once through, he remained low, using outbuildings for cover as he approached the rear of the main structure. Wilson's voice carried faintly from the front gate professional, insistent, perfectly playing her role. The kennel building stood 50 yards away, its windows now darkened. Mike moved methodically toward it, staying in blind spots he'd identified during his previous reconnaissance. Reaching the rear door, he found it secured with a keypad lock. Standard security protocol suggested using the same code throughout the facility. If Gardner had entered a code at the front gate within Wilson's view, she would relay it via text. As if on cue, The prepaid phone vibrated in his pocket. 3591, followed by inside. Gardner taking me to quarantine area. 2 guards front. Mike entered the code, relieved when the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, the narrow corridor was dimly lit and smelled of antiseptic and animal. The surgical suite he'd photographed was at the far end, its door now closed. Somewhere ahead, a dog whined a sound Mike recognized immediately. "Survivor," he whispered, following the sound to a door marked Isolation. Through its small window, he could see 3 kennels. In the center one, Survivor paced nervously, still wearing the GPS tracker collar. He appeared agitated but unharmed, his bandages from the accident replaced with fresh ones. Mike's instinct was to free him immediately, but discipline prevailed. First, he needed to document everything: the kennels, any remaining drugs, Gardner's surgical equipment. The phone's camera captured it all as he moved silently through the facility. In the surgical suite, he found damning evidence: packaged synthetic opioids ready for implantation, surgical diagrams showing the modified abdominal pouches, and a logbook detailing shipments and acquisitions. Each photograph strengthened their case against Harrington. Mike carefully photographed the logbook entries, which included dates perfectly matching the Memorial Bridge crossings Martinez had identified. This was the definitive evidence they needed: the direct link between Highland Pharmaceuticals, elite security, and the drug trafficking operation. As he documented the final pages, a sound from the corridor froze him in place, footsteps approaching, accompanied by voices. One was Wilson's, tense but controlled. The other belonged to Dr. Gardner. "Perfectly normal to be concerned about post-operative complications," Gardner was saying smoothly. "But I assure you, our facility is fully equipped for any emergency." "I'd still prefer to examine the animals myself," Wilson replied, "particularly given the unusual nature of the surgeries you've described." They were headed directly for the surgical suite. Mike quickly slipped behind a supply cabinet, pressing himself against the wall as the door opened. Gardner entered first, flipping on lights. "As you can see, Dr. Wilson, our setup is state-of-the-art. Mr. Harrington spares no expense for his security animals." Wilson followed, deliberately positioning herself to block Gardner's view of the cabinet where Mike hid. "Impressive," she acknowledged, eyes scanning the room. "Though I'm curious about some of these instruments. They're not standard veterinary equipment." Gardner's pride became his weakness. "Custom designed for our specific procedures, the pouch creation requires specialized tools to ensure proper healing and secure containment." "Containment of what?" "Exactly?" Wilson asked, moving toward the surgical table where Mike had photographed the packaged drugs. They were no longer visible, likely secured away before Wilson's arrival. Gardner seemed to realize his error. "Specialized medication. For the dog's unique health requirements." "Of course." Wilson set down her medical bag. "I'd like to see the animals now, if possible, particularly the German Shepherd brought in this morning." Gardner's demeanor shifted subtly. "That won't be necessary. He's under quarantine protocols until we determine if his recent adventures exposed him to any pathogens. As the veterinarian who treated his initial injuries, I have a professional obligation to ensure continuity of care," Wilson insisted. The standoff was interrupted by the suite's door opening again. William Harrington entered, his tailored suit incongruous in the clinical setting. Despite his polished appearance, tension radiated from him. "Dr. Wilson, he greeted with practiced charm. This is an unexpected pleasure. Thomas mentioned a colleague had stopped by with concerns about our operation. Mr. Harrington, Wilson acknowledged, maintaining her professional composure. I was explaining my interest in following up on a former patient brought here this morning. Harrington's smile never reached his eyes. Yes, the German shepherd from Officer Reynolds' unfortunate accident. A remarkable animal, surviving both incidents. He studied Wilson carefully. Your dedication to animal welfare is commendable, Doctor. Though I'm curious about the timing of your visit, so soon after the animal's transfer. The threat beneath his words was unmistakable. Mike tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. The plan had been for Wilson to maintain her cover, gather information, and leave safely, not face direct confrontation with Harrington himself. Standard practice for high-value animals, Wilson replied evenly, particularly those involved in active cases. Active cases, Harrington repeated softly. Interesting choice of words. He moved toward a computer terminal, tapping several keys. Security camera feeds appeared on the monitor, including one showing the kennels where Survivor was held. Our facility takes security very seriously. Dr. Wilson, every visitor, every vehicle is recorded. Another keystroke brought up footage of Wilson's arrival, and a second angle showing the perimeter where Mike had entered. Including those who don't use the front door. Wilson's expression remained neutral, though her hand tightened on her medical bag. I'm not sure what you're implying. Mr. Harrington. I think you are. Harrington sighed as if disappointed. Dr. Gardner, please escort our guest to the conference room. I believe Officer Reynolds will be joining us shortly. Mike had seconds to decide. His position was compromised. Wilson was in danger, and direct confrontation was now inevitable. The element of surprise, however minimal, remained his only advantage. As Gardner moved toward Wilson, Mike emerged from his hiding place. That won't be necessary. Gardner spun around, shock evident on his face. Harrington, however, showed only grim satisfaction. Officer Reynolds, right on schedule. He gestured to a security camera. Though I expected you to reach the kennels before revealing yourself, sentiment is a weakness in our profession. This isn't a profession, Mike replied, positioning himself between Wilson and the others. It's a criminal operation that ends today. Harrington's laugh held genuine amusement. Bold statement from a man facing felony charges, currently evading arrest, with no official authority. He leaned against the surgical table, completely at ease. What exactly do you think is happening here? Reynolds, drug trafficking using surgically modified dogs as mules, Mike stated flatly. Exploiting trained animals to move synthetic opioids through security checkpoints, then disposing of them after extraction. All documented in that logbook and in photographs already transmitted to state authorities. A flicker of concern crossed Harrington's face before his composure returned. Fascinating theory. Completely unfounded, but creative. What you've actually stumbled into is a classified security operation developing advanced detection techniques. He gestured around the room. Hence the surgical modifications, the tracking devices, the scheduled movements. A government operation, Mike challenged. Without oversight. Using stolen military dogs, resulting in dozens of deaths, I don't think so. Not stolen, Harrington corrected smoothly. Acquired through appropriate channels from Elite Security Solutions. Captain Harlow can confirm that all transfers were properly documented. While you were surgically implanting drugs for distribution, Wilson interjected, her professional demeanor hardening into anger. I've seen the surgical modifications, Mr. Harrington. They're not designed for detection techniques. They're designed for transport and concealment. Harrington's facade of reasonableness began to crack. What you've seen is proprietary security methodology developed under contract with private clients. Nothing more. He turned to Gardner. Call security to escort Officer Reynolds to the conference room. We'll wait there for the sheriff's department to collect him. As Gardner reached for a wall phone, Mike made his move. The evidence is already being transmitted, he announced, holding up the prepaid phone. Everything we found here, plus the tracking device removed from Survivor, blood samples showing opioid traces, and my full statement. Detective Larson at State Police Headquarters is receiving it as we speak. Harrington's expression darkened. A desperate bluff from a desperate man. Check your security footage from the kennels, Mike suggested. Survivor's collar is a GPS tracker. Did you think I wouldn't recognize military-grade equipment? The same equipment I used for years as a canine handler. Uncertainty crept into Harrington's confidence as he turned to the monitor, pulling up the kennel feed. Survivor's kennel was empty, the GPS collar lying abandoned on the floor. What did you do? Harrington demanded, real anger breaking through his controlled exterior. Nothing yet, Mike replied. But someone else has. Someone who recognized what was happening here and made a choice. The facility's lights suddenly cut out. Emergency generators humming to life seconds later as reduced lighting activated. Alarms began blaring throughout the building. Security breach in Sector 3, an automated voice announced. All personnel implement containment protocol. Confusion crossed Gardner's face. That's impossible. Sector 3 requires executive authorization, which I provided, a new voice declared from the doorway. Captain David Harlow stood there, his military bearing unchanged, but his expression grim. Behind him, Survivor appeared, pressing against Harlow's leg protectively. Along with direct access to kennels for federal agents currently sweeping the facility. Harrington's composure shattered completely. Harlow, what the hell is this? Course correction, Harlow replied coldly. When Reynolds approached me about dogs being used for drug trafficking, I didn't believe him. Elite security has strict protocols against illegal operations. His gaze hardened. Then I reviewed our transfer records. Dogs provided to Highland for security training, returned as unsuitable or deceased during training. Dozens of them, all coinciding with your special payment schedule. Our arrangement was mutually beneficial, Harrington hissed. The profits included trafficking synthetic opioids that have killed hundreds across 3 counties. Harlow interrupted. Including veterans I served with. That was never our arrangement. Mike watched this exchange with growing understanding. Harlow had been involved, but perhaps not fully aware of the operation's true nature or extent. His presence now, opening the facility to federal agents, suggested a man salvaging what conscience remained. Gardner lunged for a cabinet, perhaps seeking a weapon or attempting to destroy evidence, but Wilson reacted with surprising speed. Her medical bag swung in a perfect arc, connecting with Gardner's head and sending him sprawling across the floor. "That's for the dogs," she said simply, straightening her lab coat. Harrington assessed his deteriorating position with the calculation of a man accustomed to finding escape routes. "This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved," he began, his charm returning like a mask sliding back into place. My attorneys will clarify any regulatory concerns while we continue our important security work. Save it for your arraignment," Mike advised as federal agents in tactical gear flooded the surgical suite. A familiar figure appeared behind them, Detective Sarah Larson of the State Police, badge displayed prominently. "William Harrington, Dr. Thomas Gardner, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, animal cruelty, and a growing list of additional charges." Her gaze found Mike. "Officer Reynolds, your evidence transmission came through. Quite the operation you've uncovered." As agents secured the room and began documenting evidence, Survivor pushed past them to reach Mike's side. Despite his injuries, Mike knelt to embrace the dog who had risked everything to help him. "Good boy," he whispered, feeling the warm press of Survivor's muzzle against his neck. "The best boy." In that moment of connection, with Wilson watching them with tears in her eyes and the machinery of justice finally turning against Harrington's operation, Mike felt something he hadn't experienced since losing Rex, the simple, profound certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The road ahead would be complicated. Explanations would be needed, reports filed, testimony given. But Survivor was safe, the operation exposed, and somewhere in Pine Valley, other dogs might now have a chance at rescue and recovery. For now, that was enough, in a world that often forgets the quiet heroes among us. Officer Michael Reynolds reminds us that second chances aren't just for the young. When tragedy left this decorated veteran a shadow of himself, it wasn't a person who saved him. It was a German shepherd named Survivor, abandoned and broken on Memorial Bridge. Their story speaks to what many of us understand deeply, that healing often comes when we focus on helping others instead of our own pain. Mike and Survivor's journey reflects the courage that defines our generation, the willingness to stand up for what's right when powerful forces push back, to trust our instincts when others doubt us, and to recognize that our most meaningful contributions sometimes come after our greatest losses. In their bond, we see echoes of the loyal companions who've walked beside us through our own battles, the resilience we've shown when life knocked us down, and the wisdom to know that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising again with purpose. Their story reminds us that no matter our age or what we've lost, we still have the power to make a difference, one act of courage, one act of compassion at a time.